Having your home network go from this to this is way easier than you might think. I'm going to show you what I've been using for the last 3 years so you can set this all up yourself. And I'm going to keep it extremely easy because I know how overwhelming it can be when you're first getting started. Plus, I'm going to share with you all the mistakes I made while setting this up so you can skip all the headaches I had. The location is a key component to high spouse approval factor. Ours is tucked far away back there. You can barely see it, out of sight, out of mind. And not only that, but it also does make a little bit of noise. So you'll want to keep that in mind. Like you can hear ours. It's not too loud, but it sounds like a desktop computer. Or maybe you're like us and there's one spot where it pretty much needs to go because the builder has all the cables running to this one location. So behind the store, you have all the pre-wire that the builder put in. And if you do have one of these, I highly recommend a tool like this. You can plug one end in on an Ethernet on the other side of the house, and then this on one of these cables. And you can see if not only if it's working, but which cable it is. Because sometimes these aren't labeled right or labeled at all. So having one of these tools, super helpful. I'll link this as well as everything in this video down below. So one of the problems I was running into is that this is not really in the most ideal spot in the room because it's right behind this door. And if I mounted the server rack right on top of it, so the cables could just plug right in, you couldn't open up the door. So that's, a slight problem. And the cables didn't reach super far, so I had to extend them. So I just bought these little cable connectors and they work great because you can still use power over Ethernet. And I just plugged them into some short Ethernet cables that go right into the server rack. So our server rack is in here in the laundry room. And I've shown this before in videos and a lot of people were commenting saying, the humidity from your laundry room is gonna destroy your networking equipment. Well, it's been 3 years and it hasn't been an issue. We always turn on the ceiling vent fan every time we're doing laundry, and we are living here in Arizona with really low humidity, so your mileage may vary. So once you have the location picked out, it's time to choose the server rack. And this is where the fun begins. Now, there are a couple of things you want to keep in mind. The first is the size. Server racks come in all different types of sizes, like some really tall ones, some little ones. I recommend getting one that's slightly bigger than you might think because you want room to grow. This is a 20U size server rack. I think it's the perfect size because there's plenty of room to access all my devices as well as there's room to add more in the future. Another really important thing with the server rack is airflow. These devices can get pretty hot, so you're gonna wanna keep them nice and cool. Some of the server racks are more enclosed and they have fans on them, so they're gonna look a little nicer, but something just to keep in mind. This one is completely open. The issue with that is that you could see all of the cords on the side. I looked forever on what I could put right here to hide the cords, still have some airflow. Finally, I landed on this. This is just like a screen door material that I just bought from Home Depot. I zip tied it on there and it works great. Another thing you're gonna probably wanna add to your server rack is a power supply. This one was really inexpensive on Amazon. It mounts really nicely. You can plug your devices on the front and the back. You might also want to consider a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. That way, if your power goes out, it doesn't kill power to all your networking equipment. But I really like this server rack. It's built well. The only issue was that side, trying to figure out how to cover it up. And I'm not a huge one on making everything look perfectly neat. Like I know some people out there, that's like one of their hobbies, just making their server rack look amazing and everything's so nice and organized. I don't want to spend more time than I need to on this thing. I just want it to look semi-tidy and that's fine with me. I don't know about you, but if I had the choice between an extremely slow internet connection or no internet at all, I would choose no internet, hands down. I cannot stand a really slow internet connection that only kind of works. The same goes for my smart home. So that's why I need a really good home network to keep everything running smoothly. So here at my house, we're lucky enough to have fiber, and that plugs straight into the box that the ISP gave us. Now, I'm just using this as a modem, nothing else. And I know that there's a way to skip this altogether, but it's working fine for us. We get a full gig up and down, so I don't really want to mess with it when it's working great. So for all my networking equipment, I went with Unify. And the reason I chose Unify is because it's very popular and there's lots of good tutorials on YouTube and online where you can figure out how to do all of this stuff yourself. Now, the first and main thing is this Dream Machine. This is kind of like the brains or the router of all my networking equipment. There's also a hard drive on here, so the doorbell and all the cameras can record 24/7 to that hard drive. And that's another reason I went with Unify. And below it is a Unify PoE switch. And PoE stands for Power over Ethernet. That way, all the cameras or the Wi-Fi access points can just plug one Ethernet cable into those devices and it goes all the way to right here. And this provides the power and the data. So one of the mistakes I made while setting this up is how I connected the switch to the Dream Machine Pro. I just first plugged in an Ethernet cable from one to the other because that's just what made sense. But then there was a comment on a video saying, why aren't you using an SFP Plus cable? Which I had no idea what that was. So I looked it up on Amazon. It was only $10 and it's just this little blue cable and it speeds everything up. It's so much faster. So don't make the same mistake I did. You might have noticed a bunch of the cables right here don't look the best compared to other network racks. Those usually have a patch panel. I don't really find that necessary. I think it looks fine for me and I don't really need it to be extra organized. Like the Unify app tells you exactly what port all the cords are plugged into. So for example, the other day I had to swap two of the cameras and so I had to switch some of the cables and it was really easy. It took me about like 30 seconds because I just looked in the app, told me what port, unplugged it, swapped it. So easy. So I don't really need a patch panel, but if you want it to look a little nicer than mine, then yeah, I would get one. Another reason I went with Unify is the integration into Home Assistant. If my phone is connected to Wi-Fi, that will show up in Home Assistant. So if my wife's phone and my phone are away from the house, it can run an automation to put our house in away mode, or if someone comes home, that phone will connect to Wi-Fi and the home will automatically go into home mode. So you don't need Unify for that kind of integration. There are other networking integrations that work the same, but the Unify one does work really well. So another benefit of the server rack is a place to put all of your smart home hubs. And as you can see, I have a lot of smart home hubs, like probably a lot of you guys do too as well. And this is why you might want a slightly bigger server rack, because you don't want a tight little space where you're bunching all your hubs up together. That will create a lot of interference because a lot of these hubs, even though they're hardwired in, they're connecting wirelessly to a bunch of light bulbs and other devices around your house. So it's nice to kind of spread them out. Down here, I have a Raspberry Pi 4 running Home Assistant, and I don't have the USB stick for Zigbee and Z-Wave plugged straight into it. That's what I did when I first started. Another mistake that I made, had a lot of interference, and I was like, why isn't this working well? And then I plugged in a USB extender that goes all the way up here. And now I have zero issues with interference. Yeah, I have some other hubs on here as well, like Ring, Lutron, Hue, and I have plenty of room for more smart home hubs on this rack. Not that I want some more smart home hubs, but you know, at least I have the option. So the last thing on this server rack is something that I haven't really talked about yet on the channel, but it's something that my family loves, and it's the Synology NAS. This does way more than I thought it would. When I originally bought it, I thought, oh man, this is gonna be a massive pain to figure out and it's just gonna be something I don't really use much, but it's the complete opposite. It was so easy to set up and we use it all the time. If you've never used a NAS before, basically it stores all of your data. This one has 4 hard drive bays. It's in a RAID, that way if one of the drives fails, you won't lose all of your data. You can just swap it out with another drive and it'll rebuild itself. So it's super reliable. This one is kind of underpowered. It only has 4 gigs of RAM, but I've had zero issues with any kind of like hardware limitations. And it comes with all these apps you can use, like a mobile app that will sync up all of your photos automatically. We have all of our movies and family movies and everything on here. You can actually install Plex server on the Synology NAS, and then you can play all of your videos and all of your TVs and everything. Really, really easy to use. You don't need a whole server rack for a NAS system, but the NAS does take up a lot of room, so it's a great spot for it. So this switch in my server rack isn't the only switch in my house. I have a bunch of these smaller switches in different rooms all around, and the way it works is I just plug the small switch into the wall, and then it connects all the way back to this bigger switch. So everything is connected. And that way my devices run a lot faster because they're hardwired, and they're not using up Wi-Fi, so all the Wi-Fi devices can run faster as well. All right, that about does it. Hopefully it wasn't too complicated, but if you have any questions, then let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching.